Welcome, everyone. We are going to start our program very soon. Please take a seat. Thank you. Yes, let's find a comfortable seat. We have a fun program ahead. John, if you can please join us up here. You have a choice, either one here. Why don't we have you right there? Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I am Pamela Tang, Vice President of MITARchA, and your host this evening. Welcome to this very first MITARchA event in the Bay Area. On behalf of the MITARchA board, I'd like to welcome our MIT alumni and our friends from AIA San Francisco. There's a special welcome also that goes all the way out to Cambridge. Tonight, we have the special audience in Cambridge, Building 7, Long Lounge. If that sounds familiar, that's where our Course 4 MIT students are gathered for coffee and donuts the night before final review. We are live streaming this event to them, so they actually see us as we proceed through the evening. They're gathered with Jacob Kane, MITARchA president. I have to say, this has been a bi-coastal team effort to get this launched. And we're very, very proud of our recipient here, Jeffrey. Greetings also to fellow alumni across the country and across the world. Thank you for tuning in. I have also a special thank you to Charles Salter, class of '69, and his engineer Lloyd Ranola, who has actually provided tech support so that we have our live stream tonight. Thank you. MIT's School of Architecture holds a special place in our heart. Not only because it's the oldest school of architecture in the nation, not only because it is globally recognized for its excellence in the teaching of architecture, but because it was the crucible that shaped us. As a foreign student from Hong Kong, I took my first architecture class at MIT my freshman year 40 years ago. It changed my life. This resonates with you because it has happened to you too. How many hours, days, nights, and weekends have you spent in Building 7? Whether we were there as undergraduates or graduates, it doesn't matter. We drank the same coffee from Lobdell and ate from the same food truck on Mass Ave. We also took the same classes and learned the grades. Leon Greuser, whose daughter, Sarita Greuser, is here in the audience joining us tonight. Ed Allen, Stanford Anderson, Fernando Domeco, John Habraken, and many more. Fellow alumni traveled to the moon and made it back, have now made San Francisco our home. We are neighbors, and we belong to one of the most supportive alumni networks in the world. And MIT Club of Northern California is the leader of the pack. Thanks to their support, we have been able to publicize this event to let all alumni in the Bay Area know about our celebration tonight. Thank you to MIT CNC President, Club of Northern California President, Bridget Brett, Bridget is on a plane to Greece and sends her love. MITArchA was founded and approved by the MIT Alumni Association in 2015. Hope that rings a bell, John. Course 4 graduates, it was founded for us, for Course 4 graduates who share the special affinity for architecture, to help us stay connected with each other and with MIT. When I graduated from Course 4, I wished that there was a network of MIT architecture alumni who could advise me and guide me on my professional development. That is why I answered the call to make MITArchA a reality. That is why I initiated the Alumni Achievement Award and volunteered to sponsor this event and kickstart MITArchA San Francisco. That is why I have invited you here tonight to recognize the capacity of our community, the strength of our numbers, and the distinguished role models in our midst. We have 5,000 alumni worldwide. Let's work together to build our MITArchA community. We're very young, 2 years old. So we need us. We need us to support, to nurture and grow, and be the force that we can be. Join us. Please take a postcard outside, and sign up to become a member of MITArchA today. This evening, we're filled with excitement as we present the MITArchA Architecture Alumni Achievement Award honoring San Francisco architect Jeffrey Hella, FAIA, as our first recipient. Jeffrey, tonight we have 2 special gifts for you to commemorate our celebration of your achievements. The first, framed in front of you here, is a joint letter of congratulations from the Dean of the MIT School of Architecture and Planning, Hashim Sarkis, and the head of the Department of Architecture, Mi-Jin Yoon. The letter almost made me cry, so I decided I would read it to you, just so that you all have an opportunity to hear it. Dear Jeffrey, we are truly delighted to offer our warmest congratulations to you on receiving the 2017 inaugural MITArchA Alumni Achievement Award. We hope that this award will be the first of many more presented to architecture alumni who, like you, have elevated the field through leadership, inspiration, and achievement. Your many prior awards and affiliations, as well as your thriving practice, testify to the esteem with which you are held among your professional colleagues, your clients, and those whom you have influenced over your decades as a leader of design in the Bay Area, nationally and indeed internationally. As a leader in the field of sustainable architecture, you have set a high standard for those who will follow you and ably represent MIT's guiding principle of mans et manus and our permeating value of a better world. It is through the great accomplishments of its alumni that MIT has earned and maintained its reputation as the top-ranked school of architecture in the world. For your contribution to our statute, too, we thank you and join your fellow alumni in recognizing you on the occasion of this well-earned honor. The second one is a fun piece. The award was designed right there in front. The award was designed by MITArchA President Jacob Kane, class of 2000. It is a 3D resin print figure ground Noli plan of the MIT campus in Cambridge. The unique geometry of streets, Mass Ave and Main Street, and the Charles River give it shape. Special thank you to the 3D Fab team at Elkis Manfredi Architects for printing this award. Now here to present the award tonight is alumnus extraordinaire, MIT Corporation trustee, class of '76, John Chisholm. John is immediate past president and chair of the worldwide MIT Alumni Association. He is CEO of John Chisholm Ventures, an entrepreneurship advisory and angel investing firm in San Francisco. He serves as trustee of MIT and of the Santa Fe Institute. Most importantly, you'll like this, for the last 8 years, he has loved living in a building designed by Jeffrey Heller. The Infinity Towers at Spear and Folsom. To introduce our guest of honor tonight, please welcome John Chisholm.
Can I use this one?
Yeah, and this one also for the...
Thank you. Can you hear me?
This is for the live stream. And
Oh,
this is for
use this
the
one?
audience. Yeah.
Okay.
Both.
Good evening. Welcome. What an honor to introduce our most distinguished and much beloved recipient of the inaugural MIT Architecture Achievement Award tonight. Jeffrey Heller has MIT blood coursing in his veins. He received not one, but 2 degrees from MIT, his bachelor's in 1964, his master's in 1967 in architecture and urban design. He went on to become part of several leading architectural firms, including serving as partner before starting his own firm in 1984, Heller Manus Architects. They have become known as leaders in architecture and urban design in the Bay Area, nationally, and around the world. He was named a fellow of the American Institute for Architects in 1991. And since that time, even more so, he's been recognized as a leader both in his profession and in the green movement, with some of the first sustainable architecture and large-scale urban planning projects in the US and in China, including the first LEED Gold office towers in the sister cities of San Francisco and Shanghai, the first LEED Platinum Neighborhood Development Master Plan, a sustainable livable master plan for Guangzhou's north and south axes, a sustainable urban plan proposal for Shanghai's Yangpu waterfront, and a sustainable urban plan for the city expansion area of Ulaanbaatar, Inner Mongolia. His work in China often now involves high-speed rail land use and its implications. We are honored to be his fellow alumni. And on a personal note, as Pamela mentioned, since 2009, I have been thrilled and delighted to be living in a 338 Spear, Infinity Tower 2, which Jeffrey designed. I am so grateful for his thoughtfulness, for his creativity, and his attention to detail, which have so enhanced the quality of life that I've enjoyed there for the last 8 years. So will you please welcome and join me in congratulating Jeffrey Heller. Great stuff. Okay.
Hey. This.
And this is for Jeffrey. This is the Mitaka Award, made and designed by MIT's architect graduates.
Out of film?
Jeffrey, will you say a few words? Okay, great. Oh, you've got one already? Okay.
Oh, no, I need the live
You
stream.
need this. You need that.
Here's, I think you can use that for live stream.
This is the light. And we can put this.
Yeah, just stand up. Thanks. Well, first I want to say thanks to everyone. I really appreciate everybody coming today. I especially appreciate the people who are good friends and the people who are from my office. Some of my partners are here. My partner Clark is here, and I promised him I would make it very clear that Clark was the main driver on the Infinity, and we've worked together for a long time on many things. And I'm going to take you now on a journey through time from then to today. The first thing I was thinking, preparing a talk like this, the first thing that happened is I realized that the human mind is a time machine. You can go backwards and forwards in it. If you go forwards in your imagination, but you can go back to moments that happened 50 years ago or more, and it's like it was yesterday. And I will tell you about some of those, but you can't repeat them to the press. That's the main event. So the first story I want to tell, though, is I took this picture years and years ago of the school. So it's way back when. I'm going up to visit MIT with a good friend of mine who was in the same school as I was. We were in public school. We were in Forest Hills High School. And for some reason, in that kind of year or two, Forest Hills High School was like the center of MIT students. In the year I was accepted, there were 11 acceptances to MIT. They had an enormously strong science program. And in fact, I got into MIT as a rocket scientist because that was the era of the right stuff. And although I'd always loved architecture, I thought that was what I wanted to do. And I, in fact, even belonged to a program run by the US Army, and we would go shoot our rockets off in Wallops Island, Virginia. But I got to MIT and I realized after 2 months that I really wanted to be an architect. I walked across the hall and I said, you know, I really want to be an architect. They said, okay. And that was, and that's how it started. And I never looked back. But on the drive up to MIT before starting, I was in the car with my friend, his dad, and my dad. And my father said to me, he said, you know, even though you're in this great school, you're going to have to work hard in order to make your way through life. You're going to have to earn it, even though you can't rest on your laurels as a 17 or 18-year-old. I guess I was 17. And I said, of course, what did I say? I said, yeah, that's not right. I'm good. And we got in this gigantic argument. And after all this time, I realized that both things were true. That, first of all, getting into MIT was a blessing. It launched things, and it was a wonderful start to my career. But then I had to work hard for the rest of the time to make it count. and as they say, stay on the trajectory. So with that, I will show you a picture I'm a little nervous to show, but what the heck? There I am. So there, does that scream nerd or what? So there I am, and that picture was when I got into school. We had some great professors then, and I was a little bit of a hellraiser, I must tell you. So this is the dorm where I was the first year. This is by Saarinen, and it was a residential. Alvarado, sorry. See? You see? It's been a long time. Good job, Jeff. But here's what I do remember. So this is in the dining hall. And the thing I remember most about the dining hall, it was the perfect place to stage food fights. And we did that, but it did accelerate the appreciation for architecture. And the Saarinen story I got sidetracked was because they had Saarinen visit early on in my career, and they made a big deal of it. So all the students were in a room, and he was completely drunk. They brought him in. He was bright red. He was smashed. It was in the evening, and he said, "Architecture is standing at a window, looking at a sunset with a beautiful woman." And all of the professors are staring at him, and that's all he said. And then he left. So that's how I started in architecture. Eduardo Catalano, right? Catalano, I got that right. So he was one of our professors, and John Sheehy, who's a classmate of mine. Here we knew Eduardo very well, and he was always he was pretty strict and straightforward. Maurice Smith was a great one, and this is during the era when a lot of different interesting things were happening. So up at Harvard, Carpenter Hall's being built at that time, so we watched that go up, and Boston City Hall competition had just been won, and Goldman came and taught classes for us, and that was very exciting. They were a little nuts, but they were very good professors, and this was a building that over time people liked less, but at the time it broke the mold and created some very exciting dynamics. So we lived in a very interesting environment of dynamic things about architecture. Dating myself, this is some photos I took at the beginning of the demolition of Quincy Market. So I was there when Quincy Market was Quincy Market, and so I have a series of photos from that era, and it was quite something. Boston looked like this. The freeway was new. I think I took this picture from up in the Prudential building, which terrified me. We went up and there was some steel on the floors. They didn't have any OSHA thing in those days, no rails, no nothing. I got out of the elevator and I grabbed hold of a column. I took a couple of pictures, and then I got back in the construction elevator and got the hell out of there. It was just terrifying. So, and then I took this sometime, and when we started, this was the only thing there, and then Pay's building came in, and then Bill the Measurer got in the whole issue about the structure issues with it further down. So that we were always in this extremely dynamic environment. After a year after graduating undergraduate, I got in my car, I think mostly because of Walt Disney. I got in my car and I drove west until I couldn't drive west any further, and I came here. And this was indeed a magic place. And I had never been west of anything, is what I told people. My Uncle Jack told me that it would be like I was dead. That was his encouragement for me leaving New York. But it was, it was a marvelous place. It still is a marvelous place. But I've been here through a long transition. At the time, the Hartford building was new. Shell building was, these were like the tall buildings around. And I went back to school. I don't know why they took me back. I went back for graduate school, but I was so focused and committed to being at MIT again, I didn't apply anywhere else. I just sent my application in, said I want to come back. And I was actually quite surprised they took me back, because some of you know that I graduated as an undergraduate on permanent disciplinary probation. I was well in the spirit of the pranksters, and we took a fairly famous sculpture and decided it would be much better as a TV antenna. So that got on my record. But as soon as I got back to Boston, and I did finish school, my master's, and this is after 2 years of work, and then worked there for a little while. I wanted to come back here, and then I always knew this is where I wanted to be. And I came back and I worked at SOM. The B of A was just being built, and it was quite an experience. So I'm working at IT, and they got wind of my photographic background, because I had also, when I was at MIT as a graduate student, I also studied with Minor White, quite a famous photographer of the time. And so they put me in a helicopter with no door and sent me up in the air. And I took these photos, and this is San Francisco circa 1970. And so here's the Embarcadero freeways, there's nothing. There's nothing there. And I wanted to share that with you. And this is from the top of B of A, okay? And here they're building one of the world's ugliest hotels next to Portsmouth Square, and there's nothing else going on. And none of this, as you all know, has changed since then. Not a bit. Nothing. Here's a fun photo. What's missing? The building where our office is in. The pointy thing doesn't exist yet. And this is during the era of the big fight over Transamerica being done. I took this up at Coit Tower, and this is Embarcadero 1. At the time, we were at the Alcoa building, which is this thing. And so, it's been very interesting to watch the evolution of the city, and I frankly think the evolution's been great. I've got myself no regrets about it. And while I'm working at SOM, they're building it, And I have a whole sequence of these, but I thought I'd spare you and just show a couple of them. But I would set my camera up every 3 months in just the same place. I think I had some masking tape there on a little tripod, and just click them off. And then here it is, I went up on Coit Tower after it was finished, and there you go. And there's now the other Embarcaderos are in, so you can see the city starting to fill in. I worked at Gensler after SOM, and it was a design competition. This is not a very well-known story, but I thought this is a great time, going back in time. I was the design architect for the Gensler entry, so it was Gensler and HOK, and then they merged the two, so we worked with together through that. But we basically did the scheme which created the ultimate partie of Levi Plaza. So I always used to tell Art, why don't you, go back and claim it? And he sort of did, sort of didn't. Another fun building, this is early days, the Galaxy Movie Theater. Time magazine actually had this in their magazine as one of the 10 best buildings of the year, which was quite a kick. Of course, now it's torn down, so what does that tell, what does that say about me? Had the pleasure back then, this is at KMD of Washington, Montgomery, And that's where I met Clark, by the way, back then. And, you know, we started the firm in '84. And I'll get to the firm thing, but I wanted to then tell you about some of the other wanderings that I've done, because I think it's important not only to talk about what you do as an architect, but what you do as a person, and also as an architect spreading to a broader approach to how you deal with the society we live in. So this is Moscow. This is Moscow in 1989. In Armenia, in Soviet Armenia, the winter before had been the big earthquake. It was one of the biggest earthquakes recorded in the continent there. And a group of us go, we volunteer. I got a hold of the consulate here. We got permission. It was a national group, of which I think 2 became national presidents of the AIA. And we go off to help on the replanning side, not on the emergency side, for after the earthquake in Armenia. So this is what it looked like when we got there. This is April, by the way. It was kind of fun, but it was quite exciting. And a whole number of people, Mike Stanton, Ron Altoon, they became AIA presidents. Pete Hasselman, well known to everybody. Bob Odermatt, he was chancellor of the fellows and so on. And you probably know this guy over here. The 2 soldiers were coming to get me at that moment. They had gotten wind. And this is in my, I think I'm going to become a Russian communist mode. And, you know, of course, we got to see wonderful things like the Kremlin. And then this is the full group. There were 7 of us. We go off down to Armenia. We go to an airport called Domodedovo. Okay, now it took me 2 years to be able to say Domodedovo. And the unique thing was, after all of this, I worked in Russia off and on for about 5 years, and I actually got to do master planning at Domodedovo. And this was a display of a twin turboprop from the earlier era. But then the trip got serious, okay? So all fun to now, but then we got down there. So this is in the area around the north of Yerevan, centered the earthquake, which was on the European scale a 12, which here would be pushing towards 8.5 to close to 9. And this is what the region looked like. The number of dead was never really known. In Spitak, the town I will show you a picture of, and the one we replanned, but away from the fault line, at least 25,000 people died, which was almost the whole town. And in any case, we learned a lot about resiliency and not having it. And what was very interesting was that the modern buildings fell down, but the older ones didn't, and that was because of the quality of the construction. In fact, built during the Brezhnev era, and probably almost criminal in the negligence of the construction and the corruption. This was a prototypical 16-story high-rise residential tower, and there were 2 or 3 of those, and they all looked like that. And so, you know, when we were there, there were people entombed in those, and you know, nothing was going to happen until, and this is Spitak itself. So we're standing on the road, we're looking at Spitak, city of 30,000, except not, because there's nothing left standing, not a stick. And this is the fault line is right here, and from here to here, the earth lifted 8 feet in differential, and moved about 25 feet laterally too. But it was, you know, it was a strong experience, and I think we were all very glad we were there. So we holed up in a hotel, and we got a room for working, and we kind of banged away at what to do for this now disappeared town and evolved a new plan up the road and then presented it to the local government, and everybody was quite pleased about that. And the way you knew they were pleased is because we were in this rat hole of a hotel, and then they took us for dinner to the Communist Party Hotel, which was really nice, looked like a Ritz-Carlton. They said, next time you come, you stay here. So we knew they liked it. And then I went with some of the people, actually a few of us went. This is the Armenian monument to the genocide of 1915. And there's this new movie out called The Promise. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to see it. It's about this. So this is the actual national monument. And then what happens? I come back. This is 89, right? It's 89. I come back, and we come back, and 6 months later, the bridge goes down. Not only does the bridge go down, and by the way, living in the East Bay, to start taking the ferry. Well, the ferry was quite cool. I kind of like that, being forced to it. The other thing that went down was the Cypress. See? And I drove the Cypress every day to work. And I'd come home at about 5:30 or so, and the earthquake said 5:04. And I was at the ball game that day, which is probably one of the reasons I'm still here. And in town, there was all kinds of cosmetic damage as well. And then the next adventure was, got to rebuild the bridge. And the Caltrans and the state came up with this. Everybody screamed. You probably all know this part. And so this group was formed, the EDAP, Engineering and Design Advisory Panel, which I got a chance to be on, and I thank Jim Chappell for that, because I think I went and jumped up and down in front of him and said, okay, you can do it. So thanks, Jim. But I was on this panel, and we were going through this, sadly, for 23 years, as you know, because it's California. In China, they build the same bridge in 2.5 years. That's a fact. That's not like faking it. So, but I did get to do some exciting things. So this is the bridge. Do you remember the rollout where they rolled out the old section and rolled in the new as a temporary bypass? So I'm there on the day. It's Labor Day weekend of whatever year it was. They've pushed the old section out. They cut it out, and it's over here. And this is the new section, and there's this guys squirting. They've got hydraulic jacks, and they're squirting Joy soap on the sliders for this multi-hundred-ton thing that's as big as a football field to slide back across. So here you're seeing something you would never see again, which is the bridge on end, only, this piece missing that's 300 feet long. And then later, of course, the new bridges come in, and, I think we're all very proud of it for the design, but there was really a lot of heat between then and now. And this part's quite great. I have a bunch of these photos. So this bridge stops here, and this part stops here. And when you're out there looking, it's like, how can it do that, right? So there were really a lot of things. The next big adventure then was going to China. And I went to give a talk in Seoul, Korea, part of the Tall Building Council meeting. And I'd never been to mainland, so I said, I think I ought to go and see Shanghai. I really wanted to. So, and it was only 2 hours away. So I get on a plane, I fly to Shanghai, I get off, and I get in this terminal. And I kind of go, what? Because this is, bigger in scale than anything I'd ever experienced in my life. Oh, and by the way, since this, which was 2004, this terminal is now twice as long, and they built another terminal. So China was this jaw-dropping thing. And I go on the maglev, which had just opened. I'm wandering around saying, where's the maglev? And nobody's speaking English. But I did get to ride it. And so, what was left of my mind was pretty well blown away. Going to mainland Shanghai. This is a photo of the Bund, the famous Bund, and this is this photo is from 1989. This is from Empire of the Sun, the Spielberg film. Great, great film. And you can see in the background a couple of buildings starting, you know. And at the time, okay, this is 2004, just to show you the rate of acceleration. At the time, the Jin Mao Tower by Skidmore is just the only thing there. You know, this is over in the Pudong. And so here's a shot from it's a panorama I pieced together with help. And I'm on the Bund side looking back, and here it is, boom. And all this other stuff's getting built. And this is 2004. And I have this series of photos which kind of go through what happened. And then I got a couple of others just to show what really is going on in China. And by the way, my business plan that I brought back to Clark was, we got to be there. That was the business plan. And it's, you know, it worked out really well. Clark rolled his eyes a little bit, but not so much. So this is 1990, and I showed this to somebody from China. They said, you know, you could take the same photo in about 1993 or 4. And then the one of mine was 2004, and this is 2010. You got the 2 towers, and now, of course, there's the 3 towers. And all of this has happened. Somebody told me they built 4,000 high-rises in about 14 years. 4,000. So this is it today, and you can see this, you know, towers on towers and stuff. When I first got there, it was still a lot of bicycle usage, still a lot of cultural links going on, and so what has happened, and the famous Shanghai model. This is as big as a basketball court. And the thing that really influenced was that things were happening so fast that somebody and some people had to come in and try and restore a sense of livability to it. And the Chinese were very welcome to that. In fact, one of the things that influenced me was a program called China from Red to Green, about sustainability. And so our work over the last decade plus has been to work, you know, as much as we could to help create livability back in the mix. And I got to see things like this. You know, this is the CCTV. I mean, look at that. You're driving down the road and there's 2 towers leaning in, and you're wondering yourself, how can they stand up and not fall over, right? It's kind of like the millennium, only I shouldn't say that. So what was apparent was that the structure isn't designed to hold the building up. The structure was designed to build the building, right? Because it joins at the top, and when it joins, when it bridges, it can hold itself up. But before that, there's nothing to hold it up to keep it from falling down. You imagine how heavy it is. So again, the other thing about China is opening your eyes. And of course, they went from nowhere to leading the world in high-speed rail. So it's been an exciting run. The other adventure in the middle of that was going to Cuba and working on some planning charrettes there. Cuba is the coolest thing, so anybody who hasn't been there yet, go before it changes too much. And I won't dwell on it. This is the Malecon, and you can see what the ocean waves are doing. And this is a remarkable historic section getting destroyed by salt water. So it's a place that needs protection, and it needs restoration, and it's going to open to the world. It is, and it needs to not be swallowed up and spat out. So a good friend of mine is an architect there in Havana, and I've gone like 4 times, I guess, and you know, he would run these charrettes to try and get people from outside to come in and help figure it out. This is put this picture in. This is a kind of a great story. So this is the famous art school on the golf course in Cuba. So the story goes like this. Fidel Castro and Che Guevara go and play golf on the golf course after they've taken over. And they're showing that they've kicked out all of the rich folks, and now everybody can be there. And then they decide that their mission is they're going to change it into an art school, get rid of this elitist thing, which they do. And this is just a small piece of a wonderful, wonderful complex. And then Khrushchev comes to visit with them, and and they show it off to Khrushchev. And Khrushchev says to them, "This is decadent." And he says, "This is not what we do." And he dumps on them. And from that moment on, because all this money is coming from Russia to Cuba, everything that happened after this wonderful building is all of these nasty blockhouse things, just like in Moscow, on the outskirts of Moscow. And it was a tragedy, and it's something that's talked about quite a lot. So there's places in Cuba and around Havana where you can see this miserable stuff, and it was because of that philosophical bent that came in and kind of undid the very creative juices of the Cubans, which is very creative. But just going there, this is the travelogue part. This is on the Malecon. You can see the marvelous buildings, but the state of decay. Some of them decayed a lot. And we got to, deal with planners a bit. This is all volunteer stuff, but a lot of fun. And then there's this shot. So I was there with, you might recognize this guy. I know you recognize this guy. I was there with a California delegation, and we went when it was totally illegal, except you could go on a special, permit. So we were an official government group. And I think this is, I want to say 2008-9. Anyway, so we gave Fidel a gift, a jacket. Amazing guy. When, and of course there's several sides to the story, but when he came to meet us, we didn't know if he would meet with us. The fact that we had Willie Brown with him helped the fact that we had the chief of staff of the governor with us helped and stuff like that. And we didn't know. And then at 11 p.m., we get a call, and we were told, wait around. So we're all out, knocking down drinks, what do they call them? Mojitos. We're knocking down mojitos at the Nacional in the garden, and it's warm. And at 11, we get told, okay, we're going to go see him. We go to see him. We all get on our buses. We go to see him. It's, close to 12, right? He comes in. He talks at us for an hour and a half. He wears out 3 of his translators while he's doing it. He never stops, right? So now it's like 1 a.m., 1:30 a.m., okay? And then he says, okay, I've talked enough. I don't want to annoy you anymore. Let's go have dinner. And this is in the palace, right? So we go upstairs, and the guy is just rolling. And of course, we were on adrenaline, right? The guy is just on a roll until like 3 a.m. I don't think we got back till 4 a.m. And I asked one of the translators afterward, I wasn't the only one, I said, how does he do it? And they said, he doesn't sleep much. He'll go to sleep 3, 4 a.m. He'll be up at 7 a.m., back at it every day, all his life. It was quite something. And then, the travelogue piece, but part of the environmental piece is going to Thailand. And I worked on a project for the World Bank in Bangkok. But Bangkok was very charming when I saw it, and it became this. Bangkok is actually one of the great failed world cities. And as opposed to China, which is trying to work on their problems, Bangkok has not figured out how to, and they do kind of the wrong things. But I worked in this thing called Bangkok University. We were doing master planning and improving. And the other currently failed place is India. We did some work in India, and India is fascinating. I loved going there. And traveled there a number of times, and different cities, and the problem is that they have a very weak federal government. They've got local, provincial government, and because of that, they can't do anything. So India is actually a country in collision with the future. And so it all looks like this, and or a lot of it does. And the thing that worries me about San Francisco, you know, and this is a little controversial, the thing about people in tents on the sidewalks, this is kind of the permanent extension of that, where the public realm is overtaken and taken away from, you know, the legitimate use it's for. And because of it, there's just a level of chaos there that I actually don't understand how they're going to fix. And I've tried in a couple of talks there and things, events there, you know, you talk to people and they go, yeah, but then nothing actually happens because there isn't a structure, a political structure to carry it out. So this is building giant multi-jillion-dollar high-rises in the middle of a slum area where all of the laundry for all the hotels and commercial things are done in the middle of Mumbai. And, you know, common scene, I mean, again, fascinating. But there's so much to be done, but things aren't really being done. So this is in Dharavi Slum, which is the setting in that movie, Slumdog Millionaire. And Dharavi Slum is fascinating. It has 1.1 million people in it. Which is more than all of San Francisco. And it has all kinds of classes, from middle-class people in ties and suits going to work to you know, to people living under the roads, and everything in between. And they do have a planning district, and we went through it with those people and so on. But you see the clashes. You know, everybody's got a cell phone, but it's also what it is. This is fuel oil being brought around by oxen. This picture, you know, like only about 3 years old. And then this is kind of the worst of the worst. And they have so not figured out their infrastructure that these giant pipes, which run all around on the surface, are the water pipes. That's how water gets to the city. They don't even bury their water pipes. And then they build like crazy, and they need to, but then they don't plan out, you know, transportation infrastructure or anything, and so it's all chaos. And then, you know, then there's technology issues, how you build stuff and how you don't. So enough of the overseas adventures. A little bit about our office, and then we'll wrap up. So this is us back then. This is Clark. This is Jeff. Jeff's wearing his round glasses. You know, I don't know why anybody had anything to do with me when I wore those glasses. You know, I thought I was going to be like Le Corbusier, so he had round glasses, I had round glasses. Except my round glasses are kind of outsized and really nuts. But, you know, we survived it, and our firm is over in the restaurant in the Transamerica building. This is our city model. It's been growing forever. So, you know, we're having a lot of fun with that. It was mentioned before, this was the, becoming a fellow, and it was at the Jefferson Memorial, so that was quite an event. Clark and I have this history of volunteering ourselves to stuff, and we can't seem to stop it, even today. So this is when I was appointed to the California Architect Board, and I did that for about 8 years, and put time into that. I was president for a while. This is at Clark's investiture to become president of the AIA, which I congratulated him for, but I told him he was nuts, you know. But he did a good job, and he enjoyed it, and that's fine. One of the other things we're involved in, and Clark was really leading on, was tearing down the Embarcadero Freeway. It was not easy, even though the thing was falling down. It was not easy to get it down. And I put this picture in because it's very interesting. This is fairly shortly after it and before all of the improvements. So it goes to show what, what powerful urban design efforts can really do to a city. And talk about that one all the time in China, for example. Fairly early shot of the Transbay area. And again, you see the freeway still there in this shot. I was on the task force, professional task force on the downtown plan. Ultimately, I became to realize, and this is 1984, so it was the new plan of San Francisco, and we were all keen about it, but I ultimately came to realize that the plan really froze San Francisco. So it was an anti-growth plan, not a real growth plan. It wasn't until, and it was based on a lot of the right things about skyplane and you know, allowing sunlight into spaces and complex zoning. But ultimately, it didn't really become anything until, I'll get to that one in a minute, until Dean Macris, who oversaw the plan, also began the effort around the Transbay Center, which was TOD, Transit-Oriented Development, creating greater density. And that's when San Francisco really came into the new era. So one of the other things I did, again, in the fairly serious mode, was with the Tall Building Council, I was on a task force analyzing what happened to the World Trade Centers when the planes hit them, and what happened in terms of life safety and those things to better plan and change the codes for the future. We learned quite a lot about that and what happened there, and you know, what to do in the beginning. Of course, if you fly a big plane like that full of fuel into a building, it's not going to help much no matter what you do, but it may not fall down. Recently, my latest shtick is we need a second bar tube. We need it now, and I don't care. Our work, just briefly, in Guangzhou, Clark and I worked on this. This is for a clothing company called Canodilo, and you can see in the middle lower picture, it's actually getting built. Quite exciting, good fun. Up in Tianjin, I worked with a thing called CARTC, China Automotive Research Technology Company. They're the same as our NHTSA, and being a complete car nut, of course, I was over the moon about getting to work on this. And you can see that the thing that I focused on almost the most was the parking garage, which is a perfect diagram of how to park a car. But I got to say, you know, that we also paid attention to the main building and a very environmentally conscious, atrium-driven working space. We did the first LEED gold high-rise in Shanghai, which is this one. This is on Dongdaminglu. See, I can do that too. And you can see that the building is a virtual diagram of solar orientation and sustainability. So the very first one, we worked on a big plan in Guangzhou for the new axis of development. And here in the city, you've probably seen it going up at 350 Bush. And I have to tell you that the mining exchange hall is being restored, and it's going to knock everybody's eyes out. And that's a very long story of preservation right there. And this is what it looked like during construction. We are literally holding the building 30 feet in the air. It cost millions and millions of dollars, but we had to. It was a landmark. It was the only way to do this project. And it's a longer story than that. With it came the 500 Pine, and it's I think it's a very nice building, and very proud of what it looks like. But the other piece of it, which will become apparent to the public, is that the park goes over the top of it. So St. Mary's Park, the park, is the top of this building, and that means it's Park and Rec property dedicated to the city. And then finally, 181, which has been just a delight to work on. It's LEED Platinum, transit-based. It's directly connected to Transbay Terminal. It's mixed-use office with resi on top. It's seismically and laterally probably the most sophisticated structure of any building, certainly on the West Coast, maybe in the US, with its shock absorbers and everything else that's going on. So we're very excited about that. And I think that runs out of slides. So thank you very much. And I've been told to take questions. So if anybody's got any questions, and don't ask me about my disciplinary thing in MIT though.
So if anyone has questions, I can write the mic over to you. But in the meantime, while you're thinking about it, Jeffrey, the students have already started texting in their questions. Just kind of wondering.
Happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first one is, was Jeffrey involved in a hack?
I didn't tell a story. I wasn't not involved in a hack because it's probably before my time. There's a story I need to tell. So the answer to the story is, never mind the hack. Myself, Roger Lewis, and Stan Hallett were the first 3 students in MIT to ever study the computer in architecture. First, okay? And at the time, Nick Negroponte was the other guy who then, of course, founded the Media Lab, and I knew Nick very well. But we were the first ones, and we went up to, I think, the electrical engineering department at the time, because that's what it was. And we said, we want to learn about computers. So they said, sure. So the 3 of us go to a lecture hall. And we're in this lecture hall. There's about 250 people, 3 architects, 247 engineers. And so the first day goes pretty well. We're following it. The guy's talking about theory of computing and so on. The second session goes pretty well. By the 3rd session, there's all of these mathematical sets and matrices going up on the board. And I was always like a little overachiever student, right? I'm sitting in my chair in the hall, and I'm realizing that the professor might as well have been speaking Swahili, because I had absolutely no idea what he was saying. And so I froze. I mean, I literally froze. I'm staring at my paper. I have no idea what's going on. And I kind of sneakily look over to Stan and Roger. Roger, by the way, went on to be the columnist for architecture for the Washington Post, and Stan went on to be like the dean of architecture at Washington College in DC, something like that. And anyway, so I peek a look over, and Stan is looking at me like this. So I know we're okay. It's not me. So the talk is over. We go down to see the professor. We wait until all the other students clear out. And we go up to him, and I said, you were talking about the sets and matrices over there. And Stan interrupts me and he says, we have no idea what you're talking about. And the professor looks at us and he says, you must be the architects. He says, don't worry about it. Do what you can, you'll get an A. So we went off. They had an IBM 360 at the time. You punch your cards, you give them to them at midnight. They give them back the next day saying it didn't work. You punch them again, and that goes on for a couple of months. And then they finally run the machine. And we finally got to where we can make the plotter draw architectural plans. So that was pretty cool. That was about as far as a hack in my world.
Sounds pretty good. Does anyone in the audience have a question?
Frozen.
The students get the second point. One thing asked, where was your studio?
Building 7 on the 4th floor, on the, I guess, the south of the dome. And we got to, we in the class after us got to build like mezzanines, these little rabbit warrens of wood things in there. And I'm sure if the fire marshal ever came through, it would have thrown us all out.
May I add that I actually had my studio in that mezzanine? Yes, Keith.
How old is Maurice Smith? And what was he teaching when you were there? Was he teaching collage?
Maurice Smith was God.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
God when I was there.
So you don't really get into it until your second year. It's a 5-year course, for those who don't know. And so we had Maurice Smith and Henry Millen, who was brilliant and ruthless, and a number of others. And Maurice was from New Zealand, and he was a fabulous architect and a real intellect. And his whole theory of constructivity of architecture and how the form and that all went together was quite great. And everybody, all the students always loved Maurice Smith. He was the Pied Piper, if you will. And of course, the dean, Lawrence Anderson, was also equally revered. And Pietro Beluschi came in afterward, and it was quite great to have him, and he was very respected, but he wasn't like those guys.
You have a blue spot.
Is it?
Yes.
Could you talk about your opinion about resilience, architecture in San Francisco? Resilience?
Receding?
No, resilience.
Resilient. Oh, yeah.
Architecture in San Francisco. I say that because you show third world images as Cuba, India. I am from Venezuela. I am close with what is Cuba and whatever went to Venezuela. But also I live on the mission. We need to focus on resilience.
Yeah, the question is comment on resilient architecture and its importance, and especially how it also might and does impact third world. So when you go to see these things firsthand, and when we saw it firsthand in '89, and remember, '89 was a 7.1 earthquake, 7.1 to 7.4. And the great earthquake here was 8.4, I think, or 8.3, and that's a magnitude greater. It's not like a number greater. It's a multiplier greater, and the need to understand the performance of buildings, the quality of construction, and the engineering is it's the first thing. It's like life safety. It's like, do you live or do you die? When I was on the architect board, the thing we were there for, what the board is there for, is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. That's what the board is for. Not about pretty designs. It's about that. And the safety part, the middle part, is all about resilience. Whether it's sea level rise or earthquake or quality of construction. And in my experience, what you saw traveling to these other countries, and even China, was poor construction undoes good intention and good engineering. So the buildings that collapsed, you might remember I said, the buildings that collapsed in Armenia were the new buildings. The reason they collapsed was that the contractors did not put the reinforcing bars in that were in the design. In Russia, which goes to that influence in Cuba, in Russia, there are books of design. I think I might even have one somewhere buried away, squirreled away. And it tells you how to do a building. And the buildings are all the same.
No inspection.
No, yeah, and it has the technical stuff too, but if the builder is corrupt and sells the reinforcing bar on the black market, which they did, and the concrete is more sand than concrete, then the buildings fall down in a shake. They stand up until the wind blows on them a bit. And that, you see that kind of thing everywhere. So resiliency is not only about planning ahead for things, but it's also about ensuring proper means and methods to build what people have, especially important in third world countries. That's why there's such high death rates, in Italy, in that is a relatively older, poorer region of Italy where they had the big earthquakes, because the buildings are unreinforced. Nobody's going to spend the money for that. In San Francisco, we have a program where you're supposed to reinforce old brick masonry buildings. Nobody's doing it. Well, not nobody. Most people aren't doing it. And someday it's going to catch up.
Thank you. Actually, would
We're
you
out of
like
time?
to take one?
There's one more question here.
One last.
Last question.
Jeff, you've obviously cracked the code on architecture, but you've also cracked the code on getting things built. And what's your advice for people working in a city like San Francisco that's hostile to change, hostile to new buildings, hostile to architecture? You've obviously figured it out.
Well, the question is going beyond designing buildings to get built, how do you really get them built? And how do you, in your career, help realize those goals? That's probably a 4-hour lecture. But the quick answer is about I don't know, 5 or 6 years before we started the firm, I was still at KMD, Clark and I were still at KMD. I realized that, I fully realized that buildings are public property. In other words, they may be private property, but they're out there in the public for the public to see. And when I started going to the Planning Commission and presenting buildings, I realized that. And I think the key to it is to understand that what you're doing has a public aspect to it that you must fulfill, and that if you do that, you have a much better chance of actually seeing something get to the end, especially in a place like San Francisco. But I think it's true, we find it, our firm, in all the different places, we find it true everywhere. So you have to embrace that what you're doing is public, it's not just private. And in fact, the developers will sometimes have to come to that kicking and screaming. So we help them come to that. And when they do, they're much more successful too. There you go.
Thank you. Please feel free to stay and linger a little bit longer. And Jeffrey's here.